The air in Provo, Utah, on the evening of September 10th, 2025, was deceptively tranquil. A crisp autumn stillness had settled over the university campus, a stark contrast to the simmering energy surrounding a scheduled speaking event. The scene was a familiar microcosm of American discourse, a podium, a gathering of supporters, clusters of protesters, and the pervasive hum of political tension. Charlie Kirk, a figure long accustomed to the spotlight of controversy, took the stage. For a time, the event proceeded with a predictable rhythm. Then, at precisely 8:17 p.m., the predictable narrative shattered. The sound was not a volley, but a single, piercing report that sliced through the evening air. It was a sound so foreign to the context that it was met not with immediate comprehension, but with a heartbeat of collective confusion. That silence was swiftly obliterated by a surge of panic. The crowd, a single entity moments before, exploded into a chaotic scramble for safety. On stage, the scene descended into a tragic, blurred frenzy. Charlie Kirk was down. The response from law enforcement was a study in grim efficiency. Campus security and local police officers moved with a rapidity that suggested extensive preparation for such an event. In the midst of the turmoil, a figure was isolated, subdued, and restrained. His name was Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old senior with no prior criminal history. The initial headlines that screamed across news tickers and social media feeds were brutally concise. Charlie Kirk assassinated at Utah University. Suspect in custody. Nation confronts another political murder. The arrest of Tyler Robinson on charges of aggravated murder and multiple firearm offenses presented a facade of resolution. A crime had been committed, a perpetrator was apprehended. The wheels of justice, it seemed, were already in motion. This illusion of clarity was the first casualty of the investigation. Within a day, a new narrative began to form, not from the facts of the case, but from the unsettling demeanor of those tasked with explaining them. FBI Director Kash Patel stood before the nation, his posture rigid, his tone meticulously controlled. The FBI is leading this investigation, he stated, his words measured and devoid of emotional inflection. We are committed to a full, thorough, and transparent process. The American people deserve answers, and we will provide them. All evidence will be disclosed in accordance with the law. The speech was designed to project stability and competence. Yet, for a public reeling from a visceral shock, Director Patel's calm felt alien. His repeated promise of transparency rang hollow, delivered with a robotic composure that failed to mirror the national grief and anger. This disconnect between official assurance and public emotion planted a seed of profound distrust. In the vacuum of hard facts, the seed began to sprout. That vacuum was not accidental, it was legally enforced. The judiciary, in a move that would define the entire case, imposed a comprehensive and draconian series of gag orders. These restrictions were breathtaking in their scope. They silenced not only the legal teams for the prosecution and defense, but also extended to law enforcement officers, potential witnesses, and even university officials. All police reports, forensic analyses, and witness statements were sealed from public view. The flow of information, the lifeblood of public trust in a democratic society, was systematically cut off. The official justification was to ensure a fair trial for the accused, Tyler Robinson, and to prevent the contamination of the jury pool. But to a skeptical public, it felt less like a protection of due process and more like the construction of an impenetrable fortress around the truth. This great silence, as it quickly became known, created a fertile breeding ground for speculation. The American digital psyche, already fractured along ideological lines, rushed to fill the void. Social media platforms became the new courtroom, and the trial of public opinion commenced with a fury unmatched by any judicial proceeding. The official story, a lone gunman acting out of political zealotry, was immediately dissected and found wanting by millions of amateur investigators. The first major conspiracy theory to achieve viral status centered on a figure entirely absent from the official legal filings, a man named Rick Cutler, a former police officer from a neighboring state who had been dismissed from his force under controversial circumstances. A single, grainy photograph of Cutler standing at the periphery of the event crowd was magnified, enhanced, and analyzed frame by frame. "Where is Cutler?" began trending on X, formerly known as Twitter, within hours. Unverified accounts from anonymous insiders claimed Cutler was a shadowy operative, a handler, or the true triggerman. The theory proliferated despite a complete lack of official confirmation or even acknowledgement of his involvement. The silence from the FBI on the Cutler question was deafening, and for many, that silence was tantamount to an admission of guilt. Simultaneously, another digital firestorm ignited around the event's security footage. Initial, chaotic clips from audience members' phones had been widely circulated, but rumors began to swirl that key angles from official security cameras were missing, altered, or had been entirely deleted. A Reddit user claiming to be a forensic video analyst posted a lengthy, technically worded thread alleging inconsistencies in the timestamps of the released footage. The phrase video tampering became a rallying cry. The theory suggested a coordinated cover-up at the highest levels, an effort to conceal the presence of a second shooter or to obscure the actions of certain individuals in the crowd immediately following the shot. The authorities stated that all available footage was being processed as evidence, but this did little to quell the uprising of doubt. Online, the nation split into warring camps. One faction, often aligning with Kirk's political views, saw a vast, deep state conspiracy. They pointed to Director Patel's calm demeanor as proof of a pre-orchestrated narrative. The gag orders were not for a fair trial, they argued, but to give the powerful time to fabricate a story that would pin the blame solely on Robinson, a patsy, while protecting the true architects of the assassination. For this group, Tyler Robinson was a convenient fall guy, and every official silence was a confirmation of their darkest suspicions. Another camp, however, viewed Robinson as a disturbed lone wolf and saw the conspiracy theories as dangerous disinformation designed to exploit a tragedy for political gain. They defended the gag orders as a necessary, if frustrating, tool to preserve the integrity of the judicial process. They argued that the online sleuths, with their grainy photos and unverified leaks, were creating a circus that threatened to poison any potential jury pool and make a fair trial impossible. For them, the real threat was not a government cover-up, but the mob mentality of the digital age, rushing to judgment without a single piece of verified evidence. The debate was toxic, all-consuming, and entirely devoid of factual anchor points. It was a war of narratives, fought with pixels and passion, while the official gatekeepers of fact remained locked behind their wall of silence. The public was left adrift in a sea of conflicting claims, forced to choose which version of reality felt more plausible, with no compass of hard evidence to guide them. Then, a potential crack appeared in the fortress. An unverified and anonymous account on an encrypted messaging platform claimed to have spoken to a first responder who was on the scene. This source alleged that the radio traffic in the immediate aftermath of the shooting was chaotic in a way that suggested confusion over the suspect's description. The leak, which could not be authenticated, suggested that initial bolos or be-on-the-lookout alerts described a different individual than Tyler Robinson. Was it a simple case of crosstalk and confusion in a high-stress situation? Or was it evidence that Robinson was not the initial target, that the narrative had been shifted after the fact? The response from official channels was a terse, "We do not comment on unverified leaks." But the damage, or the revelation, depending on one's viewpoint, was done. The story was now bigger than a murder case. It was a referendum on institutional trust. The question was no longer just who killed Charlie Kirk, but what is the FBI hiding and why? This question looms over the nation as October 30th approaches. This is the date set for the official evidentiary hearing, the day when the prosecution must finally present its case before a judge and, theoretically, to the public. It is being billed as the moment of truth, the day the silence will be broken. But can a single hearing, no matter how comprehensive, possibly contain the wildfire of speculation that has burned for weeks? Can any amount of evidence, however compelling, convince those who have already decided that the entire system is corrupt? The evidence presented will be scrutinized not for its legal merit, but for its conformity to pre-existing narratives. Every detail will be weaponized. A blurred face in the background of a video will become a new Cutler. A minor inconsistency in a timeline will be proof of video tampering. The Charlie Kirk assassination trial has exposed a deep and festering wound in the American body politic. It is a crisis of faith, a schism between the people and their institutions. The death of one man has become a proxy battle for the soul of a nation's trust. The urgency now is not just for justice for Charlie Kirk, but for the very concept of truth itself. As the clock ticks down to October 30th, the nation holds its breath. What will the evidence reveal? A straightforward, tragic tale of a lone assassin? Or a more complex and disturbing web that justifies the public's deepest fears? The truth has been locked away, guarded by gag orders and official silence. Soon, we are told, it will be set free. But in a world where truth has become a matter of perspective, can anyone recognize it when it finally appears? The story is far from over. In fact, the most critical chapter is about to begin. What will the evidence really show? Who will be revealed in the light of day? And will the American public, after weeks of feeding on rumors and speculation, be willing to accept the conclusions of a court of law? The demand for truth, for verifiable proof, has never been louder. The call for transparency, for accountability, echoes from every corner of the digital and physical world. On October 30th, we will see if our institutions are listening,